Great. Okay. Well, thank you, Berit, for hosting, and the BICC, and all of you for joining today, just before the new year. It's a very nice feeling to be amongst friends. I saw the names come in. I said, "Oh, I remember meeting you so and so a few years ago, and this person, that person." So the story does go back the last few years, and it's nice to be, I feel like, among friends. And I'm proud to have Renee with us now, who wasn't on purpose, but is a Philly resident too. So that kind of completes the circle. And we will share briefly the story of FemSelect, and really want to try to leave most of the time for discussion. So I will kick it off with the background, and Renee will join as well. As I think what interests a lot of you is our story from the perspective of an Israeli startup. You know, how did we take a technology from Israel and bring it to where we are today? We still have a long way to go ahead of us, but how did we get as far as we've gotten, and what are some of the perhaps tips or items that we found successful that other Israeli companies could potentially benefit from as well? And how, you know, finding a home with the PICC is really part of that. So I will get to that in a minute. Just a high-level overview of FemSelect. We are a women's health company, and our mission is to make a lasting impact on women's health by delivering innovative technologies, providing consistent results in a patient-centric manner to dramatically improve outcomes for women. You know, this is what guides us. This is our light that we go by, not only to bring technologies, but to make sure that they impact women and benefit them and help and improve their daily lives. The first product that we have, and we hope to have others in our portfolio, is a product for pelvic organ prolapse, and I will share a little bit what that is so you can appreciate the technology and the innovation coming from Israel. But a brief high-level summary, we do have one product right now that is FDA cleared and CE marked. It is a very innovative device, bringing the only minimally invasive solution in its space. You know, it's a very large market. We've got our IP set out ahead of us, and we've got some clinical evidence. Several of these milestones have been achieved over the last 3 years since we've met each other and gained your support, and many of you were helpful in achieving several of these milestones. And we'll talk about that. That's part of the story of how we've gotten to where we're going today. But just briefly about pelvic organ prolapse and why it's so critical for us is that it is something that is rarely talked about and affects almost half of all women. We talk with some folks, investors or others, who think, "Oh, it's not such a big market." And when you dig a little deeper and realize how difficult it is for some women to speak about these items, you know, you realize that it affects many, many more than people are aware of. The symptoms are not life-threatening, but definitely life-altering. And in that way, you know, we have patients who tell us they didn't feel comfortable putting on a bathing suit, or they didn't feel comfortable going for a jog, maybe even walking the dog, if there's pressure, or they call it a bulging feeling in their bladder, you know, pelvic floor area, can be very uncomfortable for these women. And most of them, we have found in our research, over half of them do nothing about it because they don't like the options that are out there today. Ron Schechter, who is on the call today, was part of helping us once we met Ron through the PICC and the Philly community, helping us do some market research and understand what's important to physicians and what's important to patients. And what we found is that there really is no minimally invasive option. There's this surgery, which is rather radical. It could be hysterectomy or even vaginal surgery that is quite invasive and requires a long recovery. And when you compare that, you know, and you look at the spectrum of, you know, non-invasive versus highly invasive, you really see there's nothing in the middle for these women. And that means many go without treatment. We've recently been in discussions with a patient who wanted to share her story with us. And she searched for 8 years until she found us online one night, kind of Googling, and she found an article about recent innovations from Israel, and she was very excited and got connected with a physician in her area. And 8 years she went on, you know, without any solution. A woman who still works, she said, "I can't take time, you know, for 2-3 months of recovery. I need to get back to work." And now she's very, very pleased with the results, and she feels that she wants to share her story. So it's very exciting to be able to help women. I'll share a little bit about the evolution of the company, because I think that's what interests probably many of you on the phone. I entered the picture around 2016 when the technology had been developed preclinically and initial clinical studies, and yet the company really wasn't going anywhere. In fact, the lead investors were thinking about closing the company down. And it's a point to kind of relate to, because it happens with a lot of Israeli technologies where an inventor perhaps takes a technology to a certain point, or a founder, and unless there is someone brought in who has commercial experience or U.S. experience or outside of Israel experience, very often technologies can die, and that's one of the risks that Israeli startups face. So I think that is step one in our success. I guess I credit myself because I have the U.S. background and U.S. experience, but that is the reality. But there are many Israelis who have U.S. experience. It doesn't have to be an American, but it does need to be someone who has experience, from outside of Israel, has experience globally, and someone who can speak to investors and speak to strategic partners and speak to KOLs as well from a marketing perspective. Very often Israeli startups will get to that point and won't realize that perhaps the founder or the medical director is not the person to take the company to the next step. It's kind of like the pitcher who starts the game maybe isn't the pitcher who should end the game. And that was a key element, I think. I give the investors credit for recognizing that they needed to bring someone in who had outside experience. And you'll hear from Renee in a few minutes, for a certain point, for me as well, recognizing that we needed to bring in someone with significant U.S. experience commercially. And that's where Renee comes into the picture. So that's another factor of being able to recognize that you need not just, some support in Israel, you need outside of Israel, and you need a lot of it. And you need to be able to stand up in front of investors and tell them that you know what you're doing, and you're not a small little Israeli startup that doesn't know the market. So I think that's number one in our key to success. The next piece was being able to find a community, and I think that's the story I'm here to tell today. And meeting Vered through the PICC, meeting Mirom and Yochi, who introduced us to Ron, introduced us to Bernie introduced us to Maba introduced us to New York Angels, and I guess I could go on and on. But it really became like a community, and a community, many of you here on the phone today, who wanted to support us, who wanted to help us, who wanted to connect us to clinicians, who wanted to connect us to investors, who wanted to connect us to other angel groups. And I feel that consistently has been helpful. I did present back in Philly. I know Vered has come more than once. I know you were here a year ago, but I feel like I've met you 2 or 3 times here in Israel, introducing, FemSelect to key members of the Philadelphia community, and always thinking of us. I know, Vered, you send me those pings every once in a while. You should meet this person. You should talk to this person. Have you thought about this? And that's very important, very important. And that's the role that the PICC can play, having, the interest of both Israeli technologies in mind, but also the integration into the U.S. market. So I would say that's really the number 2, if I have to say, of success steps. And I would say the third would then be really beginning to establish a U.S. presence. We're still working our way there. We need to hire a team, and for that we need our next round of funding. But we did establish a U.S. subsidiary. We did establish a U.S. customer service organization. We did establish, a full-time person on the ground, Joel Chechik, who's been with us now for 2 years. We have a 215 telephone number too, little things like that. So I think all of that goes a long way to establishing the branding of the company as being really ready for the U.S. market. So I think, those were a couple of key aspects of our success thus far. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the next aspect was really realizing that In order to get to the next step, we're going to need to bring in, serious investors, serious commercial activity, serious selling team. And actually, it was Bernie who introduced me to Renee. And now Renee is going to be part of that story as we go on. And it's been with us almost a year. It seems hard to believe. And so now I'll pass it to Renee to, share what she thinks has been the success of FemSelect to this point and where we're going from here.
Great. Good morning or good evening, I guess, depending on where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was funny, Debbie, you say that. I was thinking this morning, I'm like, I'm just about at the 1-year anniversary, I think. Because I think my first official meeting with FemSelect, we were at OGS in Nashville. So it's been a really, it's been a great year. And how we did get connected. So kind of back to that community. I actually do live here in Philadelphia. I'm right in Center City. I'm off mute, so if you can hear the trauma helicopters from Thomas Jefferson, that's where I live. So I actually got involved with Robin Hood Ventures about 1.5 years ago. And through that, obviously met Bernie Rudnick. And he happened to notice when he saw my bio that I'm old, so I've done a lot of things, but one of the things I'd done is that I ran Ethicon's women's health business, medical device business for 5 years globally. And so, Bernie saw my background. I have passion for the women's health space, and he said, you need to meet Debbie Garner. So I actually met Debbie, I think, for the first time at a MABA meeting in New York. And I think, Louise and Marone, that's when I met you guys.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I'll just give you a little, maybe my perspective, as the newest member of the team. Working with Debbie and Joel has been fantastic. What the company has accomplished very frugally. So to be basically $8 million invested and have an FDA commercializable product ready to go. Now, obviously, as Debbie mentioned, we need to raise more money to take it to the next level. But the success of getting, where the company is today is really impressive. From my perspective, since I did run a women's health med device business, it was a little bit of a deja vu moment for me 1 year ago when I saw these key opinion leaders, because a lot of them were the same key opinion leaders that we worked with at J&J. And so it was just interesting to see how Debbie and Joel and the team had really evolved this product. And, and one thing I'll highlight, when you're launching medical devices, it's really important that, because it's the art and the science of the product. So not only have they designed a really amazing product that's a great tool for urogynecologists, but they've also put together a really innovative training program. And they're using kind of the latest of technology to make sure that these doctors, as we launch, get up and running with the best possible training. And, I really have to give credit to the team that what they put together is phenomenal. It's impressive. So obviously I'm excited for getting this to the next stage. I think that Debbie and Joel have really set the company up for success. I'm happy to be part of the team working with them on this. I'm happy to bring, my experience to bear. I mean, we were launching brand new medical devices in the women's health community, probably 1 a year, back in the J&J days. Now, granted, it's a little different when you're doing it with a big company. But since then, I've been doing a lot of startup work too. So I've kind of operated in both worlds. So I'll stop there. And
well, actually, Renee, I've got a quick question for you before we move on. And that's, since 2017, and mesh being pulled off the market, how has that actually enhanced what's being offered here with EnPlace by FemSelect?
So interesting question. Debbie and I have talked about mesh a lot. I mean, obviously I was a leader of a business unit and a lot of our revenue was tied to mesh. So part of the reason why I bring up the phenomenal training program that FemSelect has put together is that when you're dealing in medical devices, one of the things that got mesh into trouble was that it got into hands that were not as skilled to, and that's a very invasive procedure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the EnPlace procedure is nowhere close to that. There's no mesh anywhere near it. But Louise, your question is on target because these people have been, blistered by what has gone on in the marketplace with mesh. So on one side, Debbie and I we always need to sort of address that that's in the back of their brain. And then we have a great opportunity to talk about, we are not a cousin of mesh, we are a solution to mesh. And oh, by the way, some of the lessons learned with mesh are that you need to have a stellar training program so that anybody who touches your product is, absolutely positively prepared to do the work in the best possible way. Now, it's even better or easier that it's so minimally invasive.
Mm-hmm.
And these urogynecologists are actually, 3 procedures with the kind of training that Debbie and Joel have put together, they're comfortable. So we kind of compare and contrast and have found that that's, pretty successful. But you're right. I mean, a lot of times the first conversation, we have to kind of really explain to them, not even close.
Well, precisely. And actually, Debbie shared with us a slide. There was a picture of a thank you note that Joel got from doctors and nurses after this one training that he did. And he said in all his years of being out there and doing trainings, he's never had somebody write to him in that personal a way and say, this is absolutely the best training I've ever received. This is just amazing. I feel so confident and so happy that we can offer this to the women in our practice. And I think something like that's such an amazing endorsement because it's really coming from somebody who's on front lines with it.
Yeah, it's funny. I've never seen that either, having worked in this space and, clearly. What I thought was really cute about that note is they actually free-form reproduced our logo. So they really thought about it.
I saw that. That was really very, very cute. Ron, looks like you've posted something. You would like to make a comment here. Can I invite you in?
Hi. No, I in working with Debbie and the team early on, we had identified a lot of these, let's call it key success factors, which Renee just mentioned, and training being one of them. And also that logo was developed by Debbie and her team and tested to choose, let's say, the logo that would best symbolize or represent the company and its mission and objectives. So I don't want to dwell on this, but Debbie has done things the right way from my perspective, because early homework in doing strategic and tactical market research is really, really helpful. And it's very few medical device startups take the time and the resources to do that. And Debbie herself devoted a lot of time and energy to participate, to guide and to be involved in the process. So hats off, because that is one of the bases of success from my viewpoint.
Thanks, Ron, for that, because I think that's something that people like us who are often involved with startups, we hear, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, I can't afford it. And yet the work that you did also did 2 things. One, it validated all of that, but it actually, because they had that, when they went in front of other investor groups, angel investor groups, it really validated it. And so they were taken very seriously, and it really helped kind of get feet in the door that weren't there prior to that. So Debbie, I want to come back to you, and you, as you know, here we are, PICC, lots of people on the call. You know, we're very concerned with Israeli companies, helping Israeli companies. How can the people on the call help you and Renee with your next plans, with fundraising, with maybe introductions to investors? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, sure. Well, yeah, Louise, as we talked about, this is really a community, and we're happy to have introductions, whether it be clinicians in the urogynecology or female urology space, whether it be investors or potential collaborators, partners. We do hope once we fully go commercial that we will expand our activities, reaching out to women through telemedicine, and we're exploring some collaborations in that area with women's health organizations, advocacy groups, and networking always helps. You kind of never really know where it goes. So I think all of those factors, you know, could all help us move forward.
Great. I also just want to mention, it occurred to me as you were talking, Debbie, that prior to COVID, you were here in the US so frequently. And I think that that was also really helped to gain traction for you, because you went to different cities, met with different doctors, met with potential investors. And I think that's a message for other people trying to break in with their own company. You've got to be there. You've got to have a presence. And now we're really, you know, Renee, when you came on board a year ago, who knew that, you know, we would be locking Debbie down in Israel and not letting her out again. So really happy that you're here on this side of the ocean. Maybe you could speak to that, about what are some other lessons that you would give to other Israeli companies who are starting out and taking a look at where's a bigger market?
To me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Well, one thing I will say, and you know, this is probably the most obvious thing, but you know, let me just throw it out there. The company made a really smart decision to do a big post-marketing study, and that's been a key linchpin to the success. I mean, we have we're coming up on the 1-year data for all of those patients, so that helps Debbie and I a lot. And so, and the company we do have sites that are not in the U.S. as well as, you know, obviously lots of sites in the U.S. And as we go forward and commercialize, we hub out of the places where we already have the data and then kind of expand from there. So I think that's another really important success factor. And that was a smart strategic decision on the company's part that I can't take any credit for, except it's nice to have it, you know, backing up Debbie and I when we're talking to investors. I think from the standpoint of Israeli companies being successful, I think you bring up a really interesting point. I mean, Debbie was an amazing road warrior. I'd see her in the airports all the time, and I'm like, you have to be exhausted. you know, she really very, very busy. And I do think that the presence is an important thing. But now here we are in 2020, in terms of physical presence, nobody's in the same room with anybody.
Right.
Now, as things open up, you know, obviously I'm probably going to have the chance to travel maybe a little bit sooner than Debbie will, you know, and I'm comfortable with masks doing that. But the fact that Debbie and I have been able to work, you know, we got started where we were in the same room together a lot. We had an awful lot of meals in airports, you know, those kinds of things. You know, we've been able to get into, you know, our groove, and we can be very symbiotic in the way we have our conversations with, you know, and I keep bringing up investors because obviously that's really the most important kind of next step for us to, you know, have a big raise to really turn, you know, 15 or 20 sales reps loose with this great product.
Right.
But so I think that having sort of the Israeli-US presence and being able to do it in a in a pretty seamless way. I think that's helpful. And, you know, even if, look, and we do talk to investors that, you know, their first, you know, reaction might be, you know, we haven't invested in an Israeli company yet. But I think that Debbie and I are able to get them, you know, comfortable with the communication and the understanding of the US market, both Debbie's background and my background. But I mean, let's face it, I mean, innovation in Israel and entrepreneurship in Israel is also well known as a positive in this category. So you try to take both pieces together. But, you know, I think the partnership's been working great. I mean, Debbie and I always joke that we cover all time zones. We get a lot of work done.
I know that you do because I see the times on your various emails. So what I'd like to do now is shift over to Bernie Rudnick. And so Bernie, as you're taking yourself off mute, you know, you're somebody that's well known in the life sciences community. You're generous with your wisdom, you're generous with your time, with your counsel. Could you share with us what was some of the advice that you gave FemSelect that you were glad to see them embrace and that's put them really on a better growth trajectory? Okay, not hearing you yet.
No.
Nope, not hearing you. So, Maroon, perhaps you could reach out to Bernie and troubleshoot.
Maybe by phone. I see a 302 number, so that's probably Bernie dialed in.
So Bernie, you need to take yourself off mute on your phone in order for us to hear you.
Or we can keep going and Bernie can chime in.
When he can chime in when he gets there. Yes. So all good, the wonders of technology. So Debbie, let me turn back to you. And I know that there are some folks in the world who think, wow, as soon as a company gets FDA clearance, you know, you should just start moving, you know, immediately, aggressively, you know, let's generate as much revenue as possible and let's get that adoption. And, you know, and you've moved in a very thoughtful way and very deliberate way. So could you say a little bit about that for us?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to go back to this slide just so you can see the gap, you know, in the timing. We did receive FDA clearance in July of 2016, and, you know, you see here commercial launch in 2020. So it actually was late 2019 when we started, but, you know, definitely a gap. And that was really based on the knowledge that, particularly in our space, but I think in healthcare in general, you really need to come to the market with significant clinical data. So we were lucky to get to the FDA with a 510K clearance, which did not require any clinical data. But then being on the other side of that, we knew that we would need both clinical data as well as the key opinion leader, the KOL support. Because at the end of the day, healthcare marketing is really best done peer-to-peer, from one colleague to another, when they share their successes and share their belief in the new technology. You know, we can shout at the top of the roof, but it really, until they hear it from their colleagues, they see it at a conference, they see it published in a recognized journal, they see it published in an abstract, it just isn't as powerful. And I actually credit a lot of the investors. I know one of the investors, I think, is here on the phone, Carmi Zisipel. So I credit, you know, several of the investors for giving us that time. And, you know, they had to be very patient, which is not always the case. And recognizing that we were going to spend around $8, which was about 2.5 years on building that clinical data. I can tell you now, being on the other side of it, there's no other way. You know, even now we're asked, oh, how far out is your longest patient?
Oops, I think we
Uh-oh.
could. Oh, Debbie, can you unmute?
Yeah, I don't know. Somehow zoomed out, and Zoom came back. So it definitely wouldn't have worked any other way, and so that was a very deliberate piece in the puzzle, and we're very thankful that the investors gave us that space. And I think it's smart that if any other company, in biotech it's less common, because in biotech that is your early stages, is bringing your clinical data to bear. But in devices, and now especially, there's a lot of digital health. You're probably seeing it both in the U.S. but in Israel as well, because it doesn't require as much of an investment. You really need to make sure there's clinical data or data of some sort, maybe even proving out the business model. And I work with a lot of startups, even more pro bono, just from my background in reimbursement. And I would say the number one mistake I see in a lot of startups, particularly Israeli startups, is they don't really know at the end of the day who is their customer. They don't know who's going to purchase the product and who will pay for it and why. I guess it goes to Ron's message of doing the market research, but in digital health, it is very convoluted. Who is the consumer? Who is the payer? Who's the purchaser? Who's the buyer? And I would say, if any of you are working with other Israeli startups, I would kind of have that headlight on, because so many of them don't really know the market well enough to even know. They don't do enough customer research. They don't come to the market. Now, obviously impossible, but you can do it over the phone or by Zoom or just through Ron or in any other way. And knowing who your customer is and who's going to pay for it. And even in our own case, I was assured when I came into this role that we had reimbursement and everything was great. And, we do have reimbursement, but there's always little things that we need to look out for. And how do we get reimbursement in the ambulatory and surgical center? And how do we get, payment in other ways? And always pushing the envelope on that is important to success.
Great. And also, I want to make a comment, and then Renee, I'm going to ask you something. I've really, I've been very aware with COVID and different clients that we have. Hospitals have really cut back or just done away with all elective surgery the last few months with COVID, and they're financially hurting. And so what I'm hearing now is they're starting to gear back up again. And that's where I also think that you have such a great opportunity with EnPlace, because it's so minimally invasive. It's something that's, it's so quick and easy to treat, really, to get a woman in and out, and minimize all the time and the exposure to COVID. And so I think there's probably great opportunity here that things will start gearing up. So Renee, tell me a little bit, how do you build a robust supply chain, that when that tap turns on again, that you're going to be ready for it?
Well, I'll speak to what we're seeing going on here in the U.S. I'll let Debbie speak to the supply chain, because really it's in Israel, and it has been one of these things where in my career, I've been in situations where I've launched products that felt like they got a bit of a groundswell, which is a good thing. You want a groundswell. But then the next thing is you get a little nervous. It's like, oh, but if you get the groundswell, can you supply?
That's right.
So I'll speak to sort of the first half of that, because I actually feel that EnPlace could be in that pent-up demand situation. And here's why. So COVID, to your point, absolutely shut these urogynecologists down. Okay, so outside of the fact that we have all of these women who have been dealing with this condition for a very long time, and we'll get back to the ladies, because this is game-changing for them. You've got a group of urogynecologists with a minimally invasive product, and they've been kept out of, frankly, this has harmed the hospital's income, their income, et cetera. So as they get trained on this, one of our major key opinion leaders, who, for those of you in Philly, is up in the Allentown area, he was in the post-marketing study. He went to his hospital during the height of COVID, March, April, coined this a COVID-friendly procedure, because women weren't going into the hospital. It's an outpatient procedure. And he continued to do procedures. And now he's reordering like crazy. And so as we're seeing these other doctors come on board, as they get comfortable with it, it's an important bread and butter procedure for them.
Great.
And they can do more of them, and they can do them faster because it's so minimally invasive that they're catching on that they can take care of, 4 ladies in one OR day as opposed to 5 with the more invasive. So that's starting to feel like pent up demand. And the other piece of this, and this is partially my theory, elective procedures frequently are quite high in fourth quarter, right? Out of pockets, deductibles, we're heading into fourth quarter. And on top of that, let's face it, we're all kind of stuck doing less than we did this time a year ago.
Right.
And if you're already going to be sort of not moving around as much, isn't it a great time to go ahead and take care of some of those things you've been thinking about? They're already starting to see it in some other procedure categories. So, Debbie and I want to be ready to go to catch that wave.
That's great. So I think, great. Debbie, before I come back to you, I see Bernie's on. So let's catch Bernie while the technology is live. Bernie.
I'm on computer audio, so that seems to be working. The cell phone, generally I like being on a telephone because I don't have to wear this clumsy headset. It's a console computer, not a laptop. So essentially, you asked me one question, but I'm going to talk about something else.
I expect nothing different.
I'm going to talk about just Israeli companies in general. Israeli companies, based on my experience, the ones I have been involved with, and I've met Debbie actually in Israel, having been involved with a company run by an Israeli entrepreneur out of Penn. But notwithstanding that, they're extremely frugal. They get much more done for far less money than companies in the United States. And this particular company had a seasoned CEO. They did need feet on the street in the United States, which was an immediate recommendation, of course, and a U.S. entity. And that's all been handled, although the U.S. entity is not officially taking in money and writing checks. It exists. And it could potentially provide another exit opportunity for the company because it can spin off divisionally or regionally. But my enthusiasm for the company was finding an Israeli entrepreneur that seemed flexible and coachable, that had an excellent board of directors. The chairman of the board, Peter Fitzgerald, was the one that originally talked to me about joining the board of directors, and he is a legend at Stanford University in terms of the number of medical device companies he has funded through Tri Ventures, an Israeli venture firm, and how many have become large. I think 15 of the 30 or so that he has funded over time have become big companies. That gave me a lot of confidence in the company, and I did join and participate in mostly talking about rounds of equity and bridge financing and how they're priced and how to best penetrate that market in the United States and get a substantial return for investors, which is my goal. So.
That's great. Thank you so much, Bernie.
Sure.
Terrific. And so as we're going to move into Q&A in a couple of minutes, but before we do, I just want to ask Debbie and Renee, you seem to be making this work pretty seamlessly here with this co-CEO. Any comments about how you're doing this, how you're shifting things back and forth? So maybe Debbie, you want to start, then Renee comment?
Sure. I think the first thing is managing a startup, and there's tons of work and we don't have enough resources. So having a co-CEO is certainly a pleasure, because it means, there's two of us to respond and two of us to deal with the amount of work coming in, especially when fundraising and meeting with strategics. I think the other part of it, though, is managing the relationship between ourselves. And I think it started, as Renee mentioned, about a year ago when we did some traveling around to investors, to clinical conferences, to doctor meetings, seeing that we had a way that we could bounce off each other and share ideas and maybe disagree but respect each other. And we saw that it could work. And I think that was the basis for launching into the co-CEO role, knowing that, we have mutual respect and we have different experiences that can enrich the company. And actually, Peter, who Bernie just mentioned, our chairman of our board, just mentioned yesterday at the end of our board meeting, he said, well, we've got 4 hands on the steering wheel now. And actually, it was kind of a cute analogy, because it's true. You just have more hands on the steering wheel. So in some ways, it could be a mistake if, one hand wants to go one way, the other wants to go the other way. But if you're in the same direction, then 4 hands on the steering wheel is probably better than 2.
Great. Renee?
Yeah, I think, Debbie hit it and I referenced it a little bit. We're different, and we have different, we have some very similar skill sets, but we also have some different skill sets. And, I think, it was funny. This conversation came up with an investor, and her comment was, I think it works really, really well because you're women. And there might actually be something to that. But if you agree that 2 heads are better than 1, or if you think about, when you're building a business or a leadership team or whatever, you try to find people that have symbiotic skills so that they're always sort of bringing the best out in each other for the good of the company. And I feel like Debbie and I are able to do that. We communicate, and I feel sorry for Debbie on this, because I feel like she's up well past midnight a lot. And I am asleep at midnight and my brain doesn't function well, but we are constantly on WhatsApp going back and forth. I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is check emails from Debbie, so our communication is really, really high across time zones. We've sort of figured each other's
rhythms out.
Yeah, we figured our groove out, and we know that if we really need to talk to each other, like right now, we just text, and, and like I said, I think Debbie gets kind of the bad side of that, because a lot of times I feel like, oh no, this is the middle of your dinner.
Well, and I know, but I think you two have been handling this well. I'm conscious of our time, want to make sure we have time for Q&A. And Brian Kane, you posted a question here, and I said that I would call on you. So if you want to unmute and ask your question, let's kick off with you.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate hearing the story as well. It's really impressive. And as it was described with a certain amount of calm. I have to assume, though, as the tight timeline tapped in, it wasn't as calm as it might have appeared.
Right.
And as you look forward, I look at a couple key goals, and it's trying to understand or get a sense of how you're going to try to balance both the commercial success and, while it might not be the same, the factors you need to do for a successful exit, and how do you try to take them both into consideration with the trade-offs and getting one done and not sacrificing the other. I'm sure it's not as simple as it might seem.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great question, because that about sums up everything that we are focused on right now, which is raising money to get to our next milestones of commercial activity, but also always looking for strategic partners and exits. I guess one thing that I keep in mind, because several other people who have done this before have shared with me, companies don't get sold, companies are bought. And it's, a very kind of small difference, but it's a big difference, because you really just have to make sure you're always dressed up and ready for the party. And you don't invite yourself. You have to be waiting for the invitation. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get ourselves dressed up and ready for the party pretty much every day. And that party could be tomorrow, it could be in a year, it could be in 3 years, that we don't know. And so since we don't know, we are, working as hard as we can to get to every commercial milestone we can get, because that is what they will want to see when we get there.
Got it. Thank you.
I also think there's a, and I don't mean to oversimplify this, but I think, because you see that a lot with companies where it's really hard to have like a foot in two canoes on, launch, sell, whatever. We feel really, really strongly that this is a significant improvement in options for women who are suffering with this condition, and the unmet need is huge. So if we just do what we really want to do, which is do good things as it relates to helping women with this condition, the commercial success in whatever form it comes will come. And I don't mean that to sound overly idealistic, but it's kind of the concept of if you do well, you'll do good, or if you do good, you'll do well.
And so also let me turn, Beth, since you were the host for FemSelect's first meeting at PICC, what have you seen and how far they've come? That, I'm going to lead you with a question. Isn't it impressive how far they've come? What would you like other companies to do? Because I know that, you have mentored so many Israeli startups. And so I'd love to hear some wisdom from you.
And we're the president of PICC in a previous life as well.
You guys always put me on the spot.
Yes, it's what we do. We're so happy whenever you sign up, because we work hard to find a question for you.
Oh, well, okay. Look, the thing that this company, I feel, did most right was Debbie. They had somebody who absolutely was experienced in this industry, knew the US market, and knew what to do. And I think that was the key. I mean, obviously the product is great too. And the product, and there is a need. But without a Debbie, someone like a Debbie, I don't think this would have happened. And Debbie said it very well. And that's what so many Israelis don't do.
So Niall, I know that you're a first-time investor in an Israeli company. So can you share some comments or thoughts? Because I know you're an experienced investor. What attracted you to this?
Yeah, sure. So actually I was thinking about this when, there was discussion about how important it was to have like a presence in the US. And frankly, when I heard Debbie present, like the story made a lot of sense. And then like I met Debbie, and I think what came across was sort of like, there was almost a sense of, here's a person who measures twice and cuts once. And that kind of resonated for me. And I think, frankly, I didn't categorize FemSelect as an Israeli company. I was investing in Debbie. So like, I think this idea that somebody needs to kind of show up and put a face on the company, like I think that matters a lot, and to a certain extent eclipses the nationality of where the company is actually operating. And interestingly enough, about 6 months later, I came across a medtech device, sort of similar stage, and however the scheduling happened, the company presented, but the CEO was not there in person. And maybe I shouldn't have, but I just didn't have the energy to chase that company down. So I think that sort of the right CEO trumps nationality.
Well, and I think you've also raised another point, which is it's really key for CEO, or in this case, co-CEOs, to just be out there, to really be a face, to be engaged, to be interactive, and be available. And that's something that investors look for, because when you're hearing a pitch, a presentation, you're not just sizing up what is this thing that they're talking about, but who are they and how will they be to work with? And, you know, do I believe in them going forward? So let me open it up to both of you. So what's your advice to other femtech companies about market entry?
I can go first. You know, I think we've said some of the key points here, which is, you know, do your homework on the market, and particularly who's the customer, who's the purchaser, you know, who might be willing to pay for it. And nowadays it could even be more than one potential customer. And be in the market. Obviously with COVID, that's hard to do, but virtually or however, you know, however it can be. And be a presence in the market. I think that's key. Renee?
I mean, I think, and Debbie kind of referenced this, but especially in the women's health category. So that's a little bit different than femtech, but you know, this is a hardcore women's health. And if you do the research and you get the insight right, and the insight on this is that this is a big unmet need, both for urogynecologists as well as women. And if you nail the value proposition that goes around all of that, you will be very successful in the marketplace. But it's not a one constituency. And you know, Debbie kind of hit those. It's like, it's got to be right. Wrap it around the end user, the woman, the consumer, the urogynecologist, and make sure that all the economics make sense. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, that's where we feel we're at right now.
That's terrific. That's almost a perfect wrap-up statement right there. I'm just going to kind of throw it open to the group if there are any last questions, comments. If Bernie, if there's anything that you want to add on to this, let's take a couple of minutes.
Oh, hi, it's Carolyn. Hi, Debbie.
Hello.
I haven't spoken to you in a while, but I just have to say that I remember the first time we met. You came to Highland Park, Marone, Ron, and yourself. We went and had sushi, and
yeah.
And you know, I've been following you over the years because it has been a few years, and I just have to say congratulations. You've just done an outstanding job, in my opinion. And I just have to reiterate what everybody else has said, is that you've done it the right way. And I really am excited to hear, obviously, maybe you're going to be coming to MABA soon. Hopefully you will, to give us an update. But I'd like to hear, you know, where you are with your next raise, where you are with regard to potential commercialization in the US, et cetera. I mean, women's health, or, you know, femtech in general, is such a tough area. And I agree with everything that you're saying in terms of knowing your market, launching in the right way, having the data to be able to make the claims that you're ultimately going to be able to make. And this is just a real success story. So congratulations.
Great.
Thank
Debbie,
you.
so MABA, when will you be coming back for an update?
Yeah, I think I was just emailing with Yaniv this week about, I believe it's all virtual, but the October meeting. I had planned to be there in person, but that's obviously not happening. I think we're on lockdown now till October 12th, so that won't happen live. But I think that's the day we're scheduled to give an update, and we'll fill you in there. But anyone who wants to reach out before then, feel free. You know, we can share over email or a phone call.
Right. So as we wrap up here, I think there's something I want to take my, you know, oh, I have one right here. Here's my yellow highlighter, and sort of highlight something, a message that came through early on about success. And that is that a lot of it is networking. A lot of it is kind of feet on the ground, hard work. You know, Debbie led us through, like, you know, this PICC first presentation, led to meeting this person, that person, this angel group, that angel group. You know, due diligence from one was able to be carried over into another. And I think that that's, you know, that's advice that I would give for all young companies, is saying to them, like, you know, here's what you have to do. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of perseverance. It's a lot of phone calls and meetings. And now, even though we're on Zoom, I know that many people, you know, kind of like flew in at 10:59 and left at 11:59 to go to another meeting. But even so, I think what Renee and Debbie have done so well, in spite of COVID, in spite of everything else, is keeping up that open line of communication with all of us out here, and really making us feel like we're partners with them, we're partners in the success, and that you're constantly challenging us. Who else can we introduce you to? What's next? How can we help you? So I think it's quite a good two-way street, and I would really say to anybody on the call today, feel free to reach out and let's keep dialogue going. Rome, you look like you have a comment.
I just want to put in a plug for a PICC, because I really think that this is, in many respects, this is a PICC success story. That this is really what we're hoping a company will do, is you know, make introductions through our network. Someone like Beth being gracious enough to host and open her office for the company to come in, for people to take a look. And people, I mean, I'm seeing who's on the call. People like Todd and Scott and Tiffany and others who are part of our community, having worked kind of behind the scenes to help make connections. And I just really hope that there's some of you on this call that I hope that this is a call to action to get more involved with the PICC. I know Todd and Vered are planning a dental event at Temple University, and there may be some other technologies that'll be presented there. And I've just, you know, it's, for me, it's been almost a 30-year affiliation with the PICC. I love it. I love being connected with you as community. Wish you all a happy new year, and I'd love to see everybody stay connected and stay involved.
Vered, thanks for hosting, for putting this all together. And I know she's going to be sending out a link to this. You can watch for that. She's going to be editing down, putting in comments. And so thank you, Renee, Selman. Thank you, Debbie, Garner, for everything that you've shared with us today. This has really been a pleasure to be talking with you. We're looking for the next step.
Yeah, and I left Sid out of the call out on that as well, who was on the other page of the connections. So I apologize, I didn't see you right at first.
Oh, and also thanks to Marom and Yochi for always organizing a wonderful and very professional and seamless presentation.
Oh, Beth,
if I may just add 2 things. Thank you, everybody. Again, thank you, Marom and Yochi, for organizing. Thank you, Debbie and Renee, for your leadership and inspiring presentation. I'd like to invite you on the 30th of September. We're hosting the first event for the dental and oral industry, but it's actually for everybody. It's very interesting. I'm organizing it with Todd Abram, our Vice President, and it's basically exploring the technological gaps and how can we provide a safe oral and dental care for all. This will be followed by another event on October 21st about technologies for rapid testing, which is very valuable for the oral and dental industry, but in essence for any business to be able to operate safely. And all of that is in the honor of the dental school at Temple and the Dean, Hamid Ismail, and the Bridge to Peace program, which is an amazing program. In addition, addition, I want to alert you, if you are participating in Life Sciences PA, Life Sciences Futures Pharma on the 30th as well of September, 2 Israeli companies that we prepared are going to pitch there. I don't know how I'll jump between the 2 events, but if you're out there, please cheer for them and connect them, and we'll send information later. Thank you all, and I wish you a Happy New Year if you celebrate it.
Great. Happy New Year to everybody there. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.